I stumbled upon the painting at an estate sale on the outskirts of town. It was an eerie, decrepit mansion, the kind of place children whisper about, daring each other to explore. I had been searching for inspiration, something to spark my creativity again, and this seemed like the perfect place to find it. Among the dusty relics and forgotten treasures, the painting caught my eye immediately. It was hidden behind a stack of other canvases, almost as if it didn't want to be found. The painting was unsettling. It depicted a dark forest, twisted trees reaching out like skeletal fingers, and a faint outline of a shadowy figure lurking in the background. Despite its ominous tone, there was something mesmerizing about it. The brushwork was exquisite, capturing the haunting beauty of the scene. Without hesitation, I bought it. Back in my studio, I hung the painting on the wall, hoping it would ignite my stagnant creativity. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the painting was watching me. I dismissed it as my overactive imagination and fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, I was drawn to the painting again. I noticed something odd. The shadowy figure in the background seemed closer, more defined. I told myself it was just a trick of the light, or my mind playing games, but I couldn't resist the urge to examine it more closely. As I studied the painting, a strange compulsion overcame me. I picked up my brush and palette, my hands moving with a mind of their own. Days turned into weeks as I worked tirelessly on the painting. I was obsessed, unable to focus on anything else. The shadowy figure became clearer with each stroke, and I realized, with growing horror, that it was a figure of a man. His face was obscured, but there was something disturbingly familiar about him. One night, as I worked late into the evening, I felt a chill in the room. The air grew thick, and a faint whisper echoed around me. My brush slipped, splattering paint across the canvas. I froze, listening. The whispering grew louder, unintelligible words filling my mind. Panic set in, and I backed away from the painting, but the whispering followed me, relentless and accusing. Desperate for answers, I researched the painting's history. I found little information about its origin, but I did discover that the mansion where I bought it had a dark past. The previous owner, an artist like myself, had vanished under mysterious circumstances. Rumors suggested he had gone mad, obsessed with a painting that drove him to his doom. My blood ran cold. Was I following the same path? Determined to break free from its grip, I decided to destroy the painting. As I approached it with a knife, the room grew colder, and the whispering turned into a deafening roar. Shadows danced on the walls, and I felt unseen hands holding me back. I slashed at the canvas, but the blade passed through it as if it were smoke. The painting remained untouched, its malevolent power mocking my futile attempts. Exhausted and terrified, I collapsed on the floor. In a dreamlike state, I saw myself in the forest from the painting, the twisted trees closing in around me. The shadowy figure emerged, stepping into the light. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized the face staring back at me. It was my own. I awoke with a start, drenched in sweat. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The painting was depicting my own impending doom. The shadowy figure, the twisted trees, it was all leading to my demise. I had to finish the painting. It was the only way to understand what awaited me. With a sense of grim determination, I returned to my easel. My hands moved with a feverish urgency, each stroke bringing the scene closer to completion. The forest grew darker, the shadows deeper, and the figure in the painting took on a terrifying clarity. It was me, standing at the edge of an abyss, staring into the void. As the final touches fell into place, a wave of dread washed over me. The painting was complete, and I knew what I had to do. I grabbed my coat and headed out, driven by an irresistible force. The painting had shown me my fate, and there was no escaping it. I found myself at the edge of a dense forest, eerily similar to the one in the painting. The trees loomed over me, their branches like skeletal fingers. The whispering started again, guiding me deeper into the woods. Fear gnawed at my insides, but I couldn't stop. I was compelled to follow the path laid out before me. As I ventured further, the shadows thickened, and I felt the weight of unseen eyes upon me. The whispering grew louder, more insistent. I stumbled through the underbrush, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew where I was heading. The abyss from the painting awaited me. I had been on the road for days, a grueling business trip that had taken me from one end of the state to the other. My final meeting was in a small, nondescript town that barely registered on the map. Exhausted and eager for a good night's sleep, I checked into the only hotel in town, an old, decrepit building that had seen better days. The receptionist, a gaunt man with hollow eyes and a whispery voice, handed me the key to room 217. "Sleep well," he said, with a strange, almost mocking smile. I dismissed it as small-town oddity and made my way to the second floor. The hallway was dimly lit, the carpet threadbare, and the wallpaper peeling. As I approached my room, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was an odd sensation, but I attributed it to my fatigue and shrugged it off. The room itself was as unimpressive as the rest of the hotel. A single bed with a lumpy mattress, a battered dresser, and a flickering lamp on the nightstand. I set my suitcase down and immediately collapsed onto the bed, not bothering to change out of my clothes. Sleep claimed me almost instantly. I woke in the middle of the night with a start. My heart was pounding, and a cold sweat clung to my skin. I had the unmistakable feeling that I wasn't alone. My eyes darted around the room, but nothing seemed out of place. I told myself it was just a nightmare and tried to go back to sleep, but the feeling persisted. I could sense a presence, an invisible gaze fixed on me. I sat up and scanned the room again, more thoroughly this time. The shadows seemed to dance in the corners, and the air felt heavy, oppressive. I got out of bed and checked the door. It was locked. The windows were shut tight. There was no logical explanation for the unease gnawing at me. As I turned back towards the bed, I caught a glimpse of something in the mirror above the dresser, a fleeting shadow, gone as quickly as it had appeared. I approached the mirror cautiously, my pulse quickening. I stared at my reflection, half expecting to see something standing behind me, but there was nothing, just my own weary face staring back at me. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. A woman, standing in the corner of the room, shrouded in darkness. Her eyes were wide with terror, her mouth open in a silent scream. I spun around, but the corner was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, she was gone. I was fully awake now, my exhaustion forgotten. I grabbed my phone and tried to turn on the flashlight, but the battery was dead. Frustration and fear mixed as I fumbled for the lamp switch. The dim light flickered to life, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. Who was she? Was my mind playing tricks on me, or was there something more sinister at work? The logical part of my brain insisted it was just a hallucination brought on by stress and fatigue. But another part of me, a primal part, knew there was more to it. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I decided to do some investigating. I grabbed my laptop and, after what felt like an eternity, found a weak Wi-Fi signal. I started searching for any information about the hotel, hoping to find some clue to explain what I had seen. It didn't take long to uncover a chilling story. Years ago, a woman named Emily had been murdered in this very room. She was a traveling artist, passing through town when she met a violent end at the hands of a jealous lover. According to the articles, her spirit was said to haunt room 217, reliving the horror of her final moments, night after night. As I read, I felt a cold breeze brush against my skin. The room grew colder, and the oppressive feeling intensified. I looked up from the screen and saw her again, this time standing at the foot of the bed. Her eyes locked onto mine, pleading, desperate. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My body was paralyzed with fear. She reached out, her hand passing through the bed to touch my leg. It felt like ice, searing through my flesh. I gasped, and the spell was broken. She vanished, leaving me alone in the room. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. I needed to leave, to get out of this room, but something held me back. It was as if she wanted something from me, some unspoken plea for help. Against my better judgment, I decided to stay and try to communicate with her. I sat back down on the bed and closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. "Emily," I whispered, "if you're here, please show yourself." The room grew colder still, and I heard a faint whisper, like the rustling of leaves. I opened my eyes and saw her standing by the window, her eyes filled with sorrow. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice trembling. She didn't speak, but images flooded my mind. Flashes of her life, her love, and the betrayal that led to her death. I saw her struggle, felt her fear and pain as her lover turned on her. And then I saw the moment of her death. The brutal finality of it. Tears streamed down my face as I experienced her torment. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." She moved closer, her expression softening. I felt a strange connection, a bond that transcended time and space. She needed closure, justice for what had happened to her. But how could I help? The answer came to me in a sudden, blinding flash of insight. The hotel had records, documents that might hold clues about her murderer. If I could find something, anything, to identify him, maybe I could help her find peace. I waited until dawn, the first rays of light breaking through the window. The oppressive feeling lifted, and I felt a sense of calm. Emily's presence was still there, but it was different. Less malevolent, more hopeful. I made my way down to the reception, the gaunt man from the night before eyeing me with curiosity. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound casual. "I was wondering if you have any old records or documents about the hotel." He raised an eyebrow, but didn't question me. "We keep some archives in the basement. Help yourself." I thanked him and headed down to the basement, the air growing musty and damp as I descended. The archives were a jumble of old papers and files, but I was determined. I sifted through them, hour after hour, until I found what I was looking for. A ledger from the year of Emily's death, with names and addresses. My heart raced as I scanned the pages, hoping to find a clue. And then I saw it. A name circled in red, with a note that sent chills down my spine. Suspect, Robert Hargrove. I took a picture of the entry and rushed back upstairs. I needed to find out more about Robert Hargrove, to see if he was still alive, and if justice could finally be served. It took some time, but I tracked him down. He was an old man now, living in a nearby town. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was enough to reopen the case. The police took an interest, and an investigation was launched. In the days that followed, I felt Emily's presence less and less. The room seemed lighter, the oppressive feeling gone. I hoped it meant she was finding peace. One night, as I prepared to check out of the hotel for good, I saw her one last time. She stood at the foot of the bed, her expression serene. She nodded. A silent thank you, and then she was gone. A whisper on the wind. I left the hotel with a sense of closure, knowing I had helped a lost soul find rest. But the experience stayed with me. A reminder that some places hold memories, and some memories refuse to fade. As I drove away, I couldn't help but glance back at the old building, wondering how many other stories it held, waiting to be uncovered. I had faced my fears and uncovered a dark secret, and in doing so, I had changed the course of a restless spirit's fate. And now, I would never forget room 217, the haunted hotel room that had changed my life forever. In the heart of Vienna stood the opulent Wahlberg Opera House, a monument to Baroque grandeur, shrouded in velvet and whispered secrets. For decades, it had been haunted by the spectral figure known only as the Maestro, an entity said to be the spirit of a composer whose magnum opus was never performed, his life cut tragically short by a mysterious murder. The story begins with Elise, a talented but nervous soprano, chosen to play the lead in the revival of a long-forgotten opera rumored to be the maestro's lost work. The opera house buzzed with rumors that the specter would finally hear his masterpiece and find peace, allowing the theater to rid itself of the eerie disturbances that plagued it for so long. Shadows darting in the wings and chilling melodies heard in the dead of night. As opening night approached, Elise grew increasingly uneasy. She reported hearing haunting whispers and seeing a figure in a dark cloak observing her from the balconies during rehearsals. Despite reassurances from the director, her anxiety peaked. She felt an inexplicable dread that something dreadful awaited her. On the night of the performance, the opera house was packed. The curtain rose to the haunting overture, and as Elise sang, her voice was ethereal, almost otherworldly. The audience was spellbound. During the climax of the opera, as her character succumbed to a tragic fate, Elise felt a cold presence beside her. Turning, she glimpsed the maestro's specter, his eyes filled with tears of joy and sorrow. The final note of the opera was met with thunderous applause. The specter, having heard his life's work finally realized, should have been appeased. However, as the audience called for their star, Elise was nowhere to be found. The cast searched frantically, but found only her costume, neatly folded with a single red rose on top, the maestro's known signature. The police investigation turned up nothing. Elise had vanished into thin air. The opera house closed indefinitely, its legend now darker than ever. Rumors circulated that the maestro had taken Elise to the spectral realm, where she was doomed to perform his opera for eternity. Her voice, the haunting melody that sometimes drifted down from the shuttered opera house to the streets below. Years later, an old manuscript was found in the opera house during renovations. It was the maestro's original score, annotated in the margins with a chilling revelation. The opera was a summoning ritual, the lead soprano a sacrificial offering to restore the composer's life. Elise had not merely disappeared. She had been claimed by the maestro, her soul the final note in his symphony of the damned. It began the night we moved into the old Wilcott place, an imposing Victorian manor forgotten by time and veiled in local myths. My wife, Eliza, found it charming, a perfect escape from the city's constant noise that unsettled her nerves. My daughter, Sophie, was enchanted by the sprawling garden overrun with wildflowers and the possibility of hidden treasures in every dusty corner of the house. I was less enthused, but a new job in a nearby town and the lure of a fresh start were compelling. From the very first, the manor felt alive, as if it breathed along with us, settling into its new inhabitants. The air was thick with the must of ages and secrets that whispered through the cracked walls and creaked in the ancient floorboards under our feet. We laughed it off, attributing our unease to the typical adjustments of inhabiting a new, albeit very old, home. The knocking started the first night. 3 sharp raps echoing through the silent halls at exactly midnight. I remember looking at the antique grandfather clock in the hallway. Its hands aligned perfectly with the hour as the sounds jolted us from sleep. I rushed downstairs, heart pounding, expecting to find someone in need at our door. But when I swung it open, the porch was empty. The cold night air carrying only the rustle of the trees that lined our driveway. Each night thereafter, the knocking persisted. Always 3 raps. Always at midnight. No more, no less. We searched for explanations. Kids playing pranks, branches hitting the house, old pipes playing tricks. But each investigation left us more baffled, the rational explanations falling short as the occurrences grew more unsettling. One night, the knocking didn't stop. The usual trio of sounds was followed by more, frantic and unending. Eliza clutched her robe tighter as we stood in the hallway, the noise surrounding us. Sophie crept to my side, her small hand finding mine, squeezing with fear. "It won't stop, Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling. I knew then that I had to do something. I grabbed a flashlight and flung the door open, stepping out into the darkness, the cold biting at my skin. The knocking ceased immediately, leaving a silence so heavy it was suffocating. My beam of light danced across the yard, the trees, the road. Nothing. There was absolutely no one. The next day, driven by a mixture of determination and dread, I visited the local library. The librarian, an elderly woman with eyes too sharp for her years, listened as I described our plight. She hesitated, then pulled out an old ledger, its pages yellowed and brittle. "Wilcott Manor, you say?" "Oh, yes. It has its tales to tell," she murmured, flipping through the book. "Here it is. A tragedy many years ago. A young boy, the son of the housekeeper, used to play tricks on the family, knocking on their door at midnight. One night, he went missing, never to be found. They say he still roams the property, looking for someone to play his midnight game. Chilled, I returned home, unsure how to process the story. That night, as midnight approached, I stood by the door, my family behind me. The clock struck 12, and the knocking began. This time, I opened the door quickly, but again found no one. As I turned back to go inside, Sophie cried out, "Daddy, look!" She pointed to the ground, just where the door would swing. There, in the dust, was a small, dusty footprint, much too small for an adult. I knelt, my hand trembling as I touched the print. It was real, unmistakably the size of a child's. Every night since, the knocking continues. We've tried to ignore it, but sometimes when the wind is still and the house is quiet, we hear laughter, faint and distant, as if carried on the breeze. And sometimes, just as we are drifting off to sleep, we hear a soft whisper, a child's voice asking, "Will you play with me?" We never answer. We never will.